back, YouTube, to another video. Today we are going to cover social engineering attacks. We are going to learn about what the different types of attacks are and find the differences between them. We are going to cover phishing, spear phishing, whaling, phishing, tailgating, impersonation, dumpster diving, shoulder surfing, hoaxes, and finally waterhole attacks. Wow, a lot to cover. Let's get started. So a good place to start would be to ask ourselves the simple question of, what is social engineering? Well, social engineering is the art of exploiting a human rather than a technical hacking technique like software hacking to gain access to buildings, systems, or data. An example would go like this. Instead of trying to find a software vulnerability, a social engineer might call an employee and pose as an IT support person, trying to trick the employee into divulging his password. Once the social engineer has a trusted employee's password, he can simply log in and snoop around for sensitive data. But this also can involve a physical presence element as well. With a stolen or copied access card or code to physically get inside a facility, the criminal can then access data, steal assets, or even worse, harm people. Now, social engineering is very successful for two reasons. One is the basic need that people do to be helpful. What I mean by this is, when we know an answer to a question, we tend not to feel awkward or defensive when answering it. The second is, people want to avoid any sort of confrontation. Social engineers will work at times to intimidate a user on purpose to make the user uncomfortable, and this definitely works. There are some techniques that you should be aware of that attackers will use. Use of authority, intimidation, scarcity of time or resources, familiarity, trust, and urgency. So let's jump into our first attack type. Up first is phishing. Phishing is a cybercrime in which a target or targets are contacted by email, telephone, or text message. Someone will pose as a legitimate institution to lure individuals into providing sensitive data, such as personal identifiable information, or PII, banking and credit card details, and of course, passwords. Moving on, spear phishing. Spear phishing is similar to phishing, but targets a specific user or set of users. Spear phishers will identify their targets, sometimes using information on sites like LinkedIn or Facebook, and then will use spoofed addresses to send emails that could plausibly look like they're coming from that person. For instance, the spear phisher might target someone in the finance department and pretend to be the victim's manager requesting a large bank transfer on a short notice. Whaling, or whale phishing, is a form of spear phishing aimed at a very big fish, like a CEO or a high-value target. Many of these scams, company board members who are considered particularly vulnerable, they have a great deal of authority within a company. But since they aren't full-time employees, they often use personal email addresses for business-related correspondence, which doesn't have the protections offered by a corporate email. Gathering enough information to trick a really high-value target might take time, but it can have a very high payoff. Phishing. Phishing is a variation of phishing, but it involves a phone scam designed to get you to share personal information. During a phishing phone call, a scammer uses social engineering to get you to share personal information and finance details, such as an account number or password. The scammer might say your account has been compromised, claim to represent your bank or law enforcement, or offer to help you install software, which is probably malware anyway. A good example of phishing would be the IRS scams. There are many variations of this type of scam, but typically you'll receive a pre-recorded message that tells you something's wrong with your tax return, and if you don't call back, there will be a warrant issued for your arrest. Scammers usually pair this with spoofed caller ID to make it look like the call is coming from the IRS. Before you proceed, it does pay to understand what the IRS can do and cannot do when they contact you. It's getting easier to contact more people too. Scammers can place hundreds of calls at a time using VoIP technology and can spoof the caller ID to make the call appear to come from a trusted source such as your bank. Moving into tailgating. Tailgating is a simple tactic of following closely behind a person who has just used their access card or PIN to gain physical access to a secure area or an outside entrance into a building. Tailgating can begin with the kindest and most helpful of actions. An unwitting and helpful employee may want to open the door for someone carrying a large number of files, someone without a company badge, or an uninformed courier or supplier without a second glance. However, this someone who does not look out of place and non-threatening can in fact turn out to be someone who is not supposed to be in there in the first place and is very threatening to the organization and its overall security, which has now been breached and is in serious serious danger of an attack. This can either come in a form of physical robbery, or in a cybersecurity scenario, planting a fraudulent USB device in the hopes of an innocent bypasser picking it up and installing it on their computer. Tailgating is a form of psychological manipulation, as it is carried out with the view to making the victim perform a specific action that the criminal wants them to do. Impersonation. This is the act of pretending to be another person for the purpose of fraud. This is a common technique and is employed in many ways. It can occur over the phone, in person, or in an email. Common social engineering roles that threat actors will play are as followed: posing as a fellow employee, an employee of a vendor, pretending to be from a remote office and asking for email access locally, as someone in authority, or as a system manufacturer offering a system update or patch. A hoax. Speeding up our learning as well, we're going to look at hoaxes. A hoax is a falsehood deliberately fabricated to masquerade as the truth. A hoax can be very damaging if the users take some sort of action that will overall weaken the company's security posture. Moving on to shoulder surfing. This is a tad like tailgating. It basically means an unauthorized third party can view a screen at any confidential data displayed on that electronic device. Information obtained can range from user IDs to passwords to confidential data seen in plain text. Shoulder surfing doesn't have to mean the intrusion into the target location. You can shoulder surf anywhere people open their computer to do work. It can be such places as coffee shops, airports, hotels, restaurants, and bars, or an outdoor seating area just outside the office. Dumpster diving. Dumpster diving is simply the process of going through the trash to find something of value. It could be things such as medical records, resumes, photos and emails, bank statements, financial account details, information about software, and tech support logs. This information can then be used to leverage an attack against a target. This is why shredding your files is very important. Lastly, the waterhole attack. A waterhole attack is a security exploit in which the attacker seeks to compromise a specific group of end users by infecting websites that members of the group are known to visit. The goal is to infect a target user's computer and gain access to the network at the target's place of employment. The name waterhole attack is inspired by predators in the natural world who lurk near watering holes, looking for opportunities to attack desired prey. In a waterhole attack, the predator lurks near the niche websites popular with the target prey, looking for the opportunity to infect those websites with malware or advertisements that will make the target vulnerable. Before we go, I do want to cover some basic social engineering prevention. Some things that help defend against these attacks are as listed: security awareness training, background verification, physical security, and limit your data leakage. Security awareness is the simplest solution to prevent social engineering attacks. Every person in the organization must be given basic security awareness training on a timely basis, that he or she should never give out any information without the appropriate authorization, and that he or she should report any suspicious behavior. Moving on to background checks. There is a chance that an attacker may join the company as an employee so that they can gather insider information about the company. This makes background screening a really important part of the company's policies to counter social engineering attacks. It should not only be limited to internal employees, but must also extend to vendors and any other contract workers. Physical security. There should be a proper access control mechanism in place to make sure that only authorized people are allowed to access the restricted sections of the organization. There should be no tailgating allowed. Lastly, we have limiting our data leakage. There should be constant monitoring as to what all information about the organization is floating on the World Wide Web. Any kind of irregularities should be immediately taken care of. This will make passive information gathering difficult for the attacker. Alright gang, we covered a lot of attack types for socially engineered attacks. And next up, we will continue with attacks. As always, hammer that like button and please subscribe for more content about the CompTIA Security Plus. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your day and be nice to each other.